Strange tales told by a Dubliner. Be Turlock con me. Story number 3. The Anaesthetist. During the summer, myself and the wife often take the walk from Rushlands down into Lethe. Walking across the rolling mountainside, you can see the landscape for miles around, with the Jura mountains and the little Swiss villages here and there on the slopes. The wife can point them out and name them all, and we can hear the distant bells from their churches floating across the Lethe Valley. With all these things to look at, and forests on the other side, you forget that beneath your feet is the Forstberg, a flat mountain sloping downwards into the woods as you get nearer to Lethe. On this particular late summer's day, we took the trail down through the woods that brings you out on the other side of Lethe Regional Hospital. As we walked, an animal emerged from the tree line. It looked like a bushy marmalade cat. It looked at us curiously and then crossed the trail to the other side and disappeared. Elizabeth explained to me that the wild cat, long thought extinct in these parts, had recently been rediscovered in the wild. It seems it's joined by stray domestic cats and interbreeds with them. So this animal we had seen might be a wild cat, a domestic cat, or something in between. It was better not to talk to it, she said. It might scratch or bite, and it might have some disease. When we got to the bottom of the mountain, Elizabeth pointed out the hospital building, which nestled against the steep slope of the Forstberg. She told me this facility had been built by the Swiss Army during the Second World War as a protectionary measure in case of an invasion or an attack on Swiss cities. Then, during the Cold War, the Swiss Army had tunnelled deep into the mountain and built another hospital, a secret military hospital to be used in time of nuclear conflict. She even pointed to the concrete structure, looking like a covered bridge or walkway, that linked the back of the main hospital building to the mountain itself. That was the linking structure between the two hospitals. The military hospital had never been used, she went on to say, and to the best of her knowledge it was just empty, though all the necessary facilities were there if war broke out. I was not too surprised to hear a story like this, for I knew that during the war, the Swiss Army had done a great deal of burrowing. They constructed tunnels and living and storage spaces in the Alps, where a whole army could be accommodated, or where artillery batteries could be kept concealed. The nature of these emplacements was a top secret, and the entrances and exits were known only to a few military men. This infrastructure was maintained during the Cold War for fear of a Soviet invasion or a nuclear strike. It was only with the end of the Cold War that the locations of these places, now unused, became known to the Swiss public, and some of them have been opened for tourism. I thought no more about this until I had to go into hospital there myself unexpectedly. They needed to have me in for day surgery, but all that was involved was a local anaesthetic and poking around in the intestine. Not looking forward to this, I went in on the due date and was put in a hospital bed. After a while, a woman dressed in white came to see me. She introduced herself as the anaesthetist, Dr. Ursula Ammann. She discussed the procedure with me and outlined the risk of infection, which it seemed was high. But instead of going on to talk about how the anaesthetic would feel, she suddenly said in a rather secretive tone, "There is a new procedure for doing this. It is very new. Hardly any surgeons know how to do it, but we happen to have the capacity in this hospital. It means inserting a probe through the skin of the groin area to get samples. The risk of infection is dramatically reduced. You do require a full anaesthetic, though. So, there's a surgeon here who's going to do this? I asked. Yes, she said. You will be one of the first patients to undergo this procedure. I will attach a needle and inject the necessary drugs into your veins in a continuous manner for 2 hours or so. I will also give you an anaesthetic through an oxygen mask. You will just sleep through the whole thing. Afterwards, you have an hour to come around again in a recovery room. Then the task is done. You should probably stay in recovery for a few days so the surgeon can check the success of the operation and the healing, since it is something quite new. She left the room, and now, to pass the time, I pulled out a notebook and pencil I had managed to bring with me and placed within reach under the pillow. I had decided to record my impressions of the hospital stay in the form of a sort of diary. I wrote about the anaesthetist, Dr. Ammann, and what she had told me about the new procedure with the reduced risk of infection. I was pleased with this in general. It's just that I was surprised to be told this just by the way, and in the tone of a confidence, as if no one else knew about what was going to happen. I was also struck by the intense manner of Dr. Ursula Ammann. She seemed to know secrets. Did she know something that I didn't know and wasn't telling me? After a while, Dr. Ammann came back with the anaesthetic apparatus, accompanied by 2 nurses. With their help, the needle was inserted in the back of my hand. Then she put the oxygen mask over my mouth. The hanging bottle was attached to the frame of the bed, and Dr. Ammann asked me after a while to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I seemed to get no further. I was dimly aware of the bed being wheeled out of the room and through long, brightly lit corridors. Then there came something gradually approaching darkness as the journey went on. I was passing through a darkened corridor now, with a glass roof overhead, and when I moved my head, the only person I could see was the anaesthetist. She seemed to be moving the bed alone, the nurses having long disappeared. It had grown dark and also silent. Soon we were facing a portal with automatic sliding doors. The anaesthetist took the electronic card, clipped to the pocket of her white coat, and inserted it in a slot on the wall beside the portal. There was a beep, a flash, and the big door slid open. The last thing I remembered was coming out into a dimly lit area where the roof above me seemed to be carved out of rock rather than part of a building. Then the anaesthetic took full control of me, and I went under and knew no more. I woke up in the recovery room. For a while, I drifted in and out of sleep. Then I was awake with a start. I had a strange feeling of being somewhere else, not in the hospital where I started. I drew my little notebook and pencil from under the pillow and assured myself of my possession of my faculties by writing a few lines recording this impression. Then I put the notebook and pencil away and lay back on the pillow. I drifted in and out of sleep for a while, and once I awoke to see what seemed to be 2 surgeons looking down at me and conversing in undertones. Then they filed out of the room. Soon after that, I was completely awake. The anaesthetist came in and smiled down at me. "That seems to have been a success," said Dr. Ammann. "I trust the anaesthetic worked smoothly." I nodded. "Soon you will be able to go home," she said. "Where am I?" I asked abruptly, looking her straight in the eyes. She did not meet my gaze. "In the hospital," she said. "No," I said grimly. "This is a different place. Here there are no windows anywhere. Outside there is a roof hewn out of the rock. I saw it. This place is inside the mountain, isn't it?" She nodded. "Why did you bring me here?" I insisted. "Why did you lie to me? Why did you not tell me that this was an experimental surgery that's probably never been done before? Or at least that I'm the only patient who has survived. It's probably a technique that hasn't even been approved for general use. I was the guinea pig, wasn't that it?" "I couldn't tell you everything," she said unsteadily. "I did not want to alarm you. I just waited for the anaesthetic to take effect and then moved you into the military hospital inside the mountain. I did it myself because the public hospital staff have no access here. The doctors and the nurses don't know. They don't know about the military hospital or what goes on here." "What does go on here?" "Experimental surgery, clinical trials of new medications, all that kind of thing." "If the regular staff in the hospital don't know about this, then who knows I'm here?" "I do. Only I know. And on this side, Colonel von Arx and his staff." "Who is Colonel von Arx?" "He is the commanding officer of the military hospital." "Good God," I exclaimed. "Does anyone out there know about what goes on in here, except for you?" She shook her head guiltily. "No, I am the only one," she said. "I am the only one who knows the secret of the military hospital. And I am the only one who works in the two hospitals." "So what do we do now?" I asked wearily. She sighed. Then she said, "I will have to talk to the colonel," and went out. She came back after a while. "We will have to keep you here for observation anyway for a few days, while you decide what to do with me, now that I know too much." She looked somewhat aggrieved. "I'll get the colonel to come and talk with you in the meantime," she said with a sigh, and went out. Later on in the afternoon, or what I took to be the late afternoon in the outside world, on consulting me watch, the anaesthetist was back with a tall, grey-haired man in his 50s, masked, in surgical scrubs. I looked warily from one of them to the other. "This is Colonel Dr. Peter von Arx," the anaesthetist said, "director of the military hospital. He would like to speak to you himself about our work here and your own case." The tall surgeon stepped forward to the bedside. "Peter von Arx," he said, and gave his hand. I took it, but still warily. "I wanted to talk to you about our work, so you know what exactly we do," he began. "In your own case, we did a very successful biopsy, according to a new method that we have developed here. And so far, there has been no sign of the complications which happened with the old method, working through the intestine. We will have to keep a close watch on you for a few days, however, to ensure that no infection appears. Then we can discharge you. Does that mean I get out of here alive? He looked at me with his cold grey eyes. Of course, he said. Everybody's not so lucky, are they? Many don't make it out of here alive. Experimental surgeries can go wrong, can't they? You really don't know until you've tried them out on the first few patients. In your case, you were the first, and clearly you lived. However, you clearly reckon with failure, with things going wrong, with patients that don't make it, don't you? Yes, we do, I must admit. It's the only way. What do you mean, the only way? My dear sir, you know as a foreign resident here for many years that the Swiss healthcare system is the best in the world. That is no accident. It is the result of constant medical and pharmaceutical research and improvement. New discoveries are being made all the time, and we must work quickly to perfect them and make them available to patients. To keep up with the new findings from the laboratory, and with the competition from all over the world, we must be bold and resolute. We have no time, like others, to carry out laboratory tests on rats, and then see what might apply to humans. We know what is likely to work, because we are surgeons working on the human subject every day. And as doctors, we also know the effects of all kinds of pharmaceuticals on the human subject. No, when a new product or a new surgical technique is made available, we use it right away in patient care. And yes, patients die often enough, but that is the price we must pay to maintain excellence in healthcare. Are you working for the Swiss government then? Or maybe for the pharmaceutical companies in Basel? Are they covering you? Von Arx shook his head impatiently. The government knows nothing about this. Not about this secret hospital inside the Forstberg, nor the other clandestine operations we have hidden in the high Alps. As for the pharmaceutical companies, they know nothing directly. But some researchers who work for those companies are part of our network and have a security clearance with us. They are all sworn to secrecy. No one knows the invisible hand that is feeding the Swiss healthcare system. How long has this been going on? I asked. Since 1948, to be precise, von Arx replied. The operation started under the aegis of the Health Ministry and the Defense Ministry at the time. It was staffed by army doctors. Because it was the beginning of the Cold War then, the medical focus was on war surgery and field hospital provision in case of a Soviet invasion into Western Europe and land battles. But there was a scandal then. It happened here in Laufen. An army surgeon wanted to specialize on operating in the field without an anesthetic. He did it here in the mountain in the secret hospital that was being built here at the time. But construction workers and engineers putting in the whole installation were alarmed by hearing the screams of the patients, and the civilian police became involved. So there was a scandal, as I say, and the whole secret operation was shut down by the government. However, the staff of army doctors continued to meet, just in the way that officers' clubs do. And they decided the work was so important it should be continued, and we should take responsibility for it ourselves. And so we have worked as a clandestine network ever since. But now somebody knows, I said. I know. What can you do with me now, except keep me here as a perpetual prisoner? Von Arx looked at me intently, and behind the surgical mask there was the ghost of a smile. "We won't do that, my dear sir. For one thing, we have no room in here for a jail for surviving patients. No, there is a solution available by now, and when the time comes, Dr. Ammann here will discuss it with you. I must be off now to prepare for a surgery this evening, if you will excuse me." With a slight bow to me and an inclination of the head to Dr. Ammann, he left the room and walked off down the corridor with brisk steps. I looked hard at Dr. Ammann, and she looked at me. There was a long silence. "He has some kind of a hold over you, hasn't he?" I said. She did not reply. "You wouldn't be doing this otherwise. What secret of yours does he know? Or who of yours is he a threat to? Tell me." She shook her head vigorously. "It's not like that," she insisted. Then after a pause she said, "He saved my child." "Go on," I whispered. "I have a son, and when he was 6 years old, he was diagnosed with a rare kind of cancer. The oncologist told me he would not live much longer, as there was no way to remove the tumour without killing him. He was in a ward in the public hospital here, and every day the specialist would come around and he would just say, 'No hope.' But one day he came accompanied by a number of other doctors, including one I had never met before. This turned out to be Colonel von Arx. We spoke, and he invited me to come and see him for a discussion in an office he had on the floor of the main hospital. He told me that a new technique had been developed, whereby such tumours could be lasered out and extracted. He said he was one of the surgeons involved in developing the technique. No one knew about it except them. He thought it could save my son. If I would swear to secrecy, he would arrange for my child to be transferred to another ward, where he would carry out the surgery himself. If the operation failed and my child died, the whole thing would have to be hushed up. What was I to do? I was desperate. I agreed to his proposal. And so he took my child away and carried out the operation, and it was successful. My child made a full recovery. He is now 14. And so you became a part of this network von Arx talks about, sworn to secrecy and working outside the confines of medical ethics. She nodded. I have worked with the Colonel for 7 years now. I'm the anaesthetist for the public hospital, as you saw. But I am also anaesthetist for the secret hospital here inside the mountain. No one knows about the 2 parallel hospitals but me. I am the link. Won't you ever try to break free? I asked in mountain exasperation. It's not a question of breaking free, but of shouldering a responsibility, she replied earnestly. I have worked closely with Dr. von Arx from the beginning, and I can say that he is utterly devoted to medicine. Every fibre of his being is dedicated to devising new ways to save patients and relieve their suffering. And every time he stands ready with the scalpel to carry out these bold new surgical interventions in person. He is a great man. Are you in love with him? I asked. She shrugged her shoulders. I suppose I do love him. Knowing him for who and what he is, who could not love him? I gave up. She looked at her watch. Enough excitement for one day, she said with a smile. Try to get a night's sleep now. Nurse will be in a while with a sleeping pill. And she was gone. And so the days passed in this windowless but well-lit space. And then Dr. Ammann came back to see me. It is time to discharge you, she said. But I know too much already, I said. For that we have a solution, she replied. You will have to be anaesthetized again till you are back in the main hospital. I will be the one to administer it and accompany you back to the other side. What good will that do you? I'll still know about the secret hospital inside the mountain and all that goes on here. We have a new solution, as I said, a pharmaceutical solution. It is called Lethe. I nodded in sudden comprehension. Lethe, is that it? There's a name to conjure with. When the souls of the dead came to the river of Lethe, before they crossed over to the underworld, they had to drink of the waters once to forget every unhappy memory, and twice to forget every memory they had ever had in this life. Dr. Ammann nodded. Just so. Lethe is the code name for a new anesthetic drug that wipes out memories. It has not received official approval. But with the appropriate dose, you will forget everything you have experienced in the past 5 days here. It is the only way we can do this. And she left. Soon she and a nurse brought in the apparatus, and Dr. Ammann filled it with a substance from a package, attaching it to a fresh needle in my hand. I am giving you the low dose of Lethe. You will now fall asleep in the usual way, I heard her say, as she put the oxygen mask over my mouth. Try to count to 10. I began. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I started to drift off. I felt the bed with the anaesthetic device attached begin to move. Then it went into unutterable darkness until I was back on the other side. I woke up in a recovery room with the afternoon sunlight streaming in through the windows. I was so glad to see the light of day again. Dr. Ammann came in to check on me after a while. I take it you feel fine, she said. You can go home now. The surgery was successful. No after effects. You remember nothing, but that is normal. Because of Lethe. She looked at me startled. I did forget everything, I said, but you didn't know about the hospital diary I had been keeping while inside the mountain. I had a pencil and a notebook under my pillow. I recorded everything that happened, everything that was said. I've just been rereading it. Lethe has power over the brain, it seems, but not over the written word. She continued to look at me, obviously tormented with doubt. Your secret is safe with me, I said. You can go on being the anaesthetist here and the anaesthetist for Colonel von Arx, living in 2 worlds, for as long as you like, or as long as you can stand it, as long as you can bear this burden which you shouldn't have to bear. But someday soon you may get tired of being the one who passes from one world to the other, and being the only one who operates in both. She smiled sadly. Perhaps I shall, she said, and walked out into the sunlit corridor. Yous have been listening to The Anaesthetist by Turlough Con Me from Strange Tales Told by a Dubliner. If yous enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe, share and leave a comment.